My role here is to introduce our presentation today. But first I'll introduce myself, just for many of you, you may not know who I am. My name is Liz Sadov, and I am with our co-speaker today, the regulatory co-chair or co-lead of the regulatory sub-working group of the Legal Preparedness Action Package. And my role is with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, which is why the regulatory aspects are, critical and part of legal preparedness. And I have been working with the HHS team as well on the global affairs and global health security agenda. Debieski will be two presenters today. Debieski is the head of regulatory policy and intelligence for CEPI, which is a partnership, private, philanthropic, civil organization that will finance and coordinate development of vaccines against high priority public health threats and vaccine platform technologies to respond to emerging infectious diseases. And prior to joining CEPI, she was the Director of Regulatory Affairs at the Biomedical Advanced Research Development Authority, with the assistant, which is now the administration for preparedness and response, ASPR. And there is where we met and had worked on these issues for many years. Also presenting today is Catherine Hoth, who is the Regulatory Affairs Strategy Lead for CEPI to accelerate vaccine development against epidemic and pandemic threats. And she supports many international efforts to make progress on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. She founded a foundation to support empowerment of citizens in a town in Burkina Faso. I'm going to get this all wrong. To support empowerment of the citizens there to improve access to education, healthcare, water, and sanitation. So I hope you will speak to that a little bit too, because I obviously know nothing about that, and it sounds super interesting. And today we're going to hear about CEPI's dashboard and regulatory playbook. And this is something that is an incredible tool that is growing, and that it could serve as a key tool for legal preparedness as well. And I look forward to hearing how we can help facilitate growth of the legal preparedness components of that tool. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, I guess, first, I don't know, to Deb or to Kathy. Catherine, you guys take it over.
Thanks, Liz, for having us chat about what CEPI has been doing, over the last year or so. I'm going to hand it over to Kathy. She'll talk about the playbook and the dashboard, and then if there's time, I'll talk about our partnership with the Cumulus and talking about valuable technologies that we see in the regulatory space. So, Kathy, I'll give it over to you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to share a few slides and then we can talk through them. I'm open to questions at any time, so no need to wait. So, I guess, Deb, if it was okay to talk about the pandemic agreement. And so we've been thrilled just that the agreement was signed, and we'd been working in parallel to go ahead and improve our readiness globally for future responses. And so when I look at Article 8 of the agreement, there are a lot of just mentions in there of things that we're working on, just strengthening national regulatory collaboration and regional efforts, looking at pharmacovigilance, technical cooperation, the regulatory reliance. You know, there's so much in there that goes hand in hand with things that we've been working on over the last couple of years. And so we're thrilled to see it. We had Precious Matsoso, who was one of the leaders of the coordination effort, to join one of our workshops recently. And she said she could see how some of the work that we've been doing at CEPI is going to enable implementation of the pandemic agreement. And so, I mean, that is our hope, that it's something that's useful. You might have seen this slide before. I mean, really, CEPI works as a connector essentially for some of the organizations, all trying to figure out how best to respond. You know, CEPI has this big 100 days mission, and so I'm sure you're familiar with that. And so a couple of years ago, we created this Regulatory Innovations Consortium, and our intent in creating that was to really see what we could do to improve our ability to use vaccine manufacturing platforms. We also wanted to see what we might do to encourage collaboration and convergence among regulators. We wanted to write down some of our ideas in the pandemic preparedness and response playbook, and then we want to make sure that we're talking to all the right people and understanding what developers need and what our regulators need and other stakeholders. So here are some of the developers that we worked with, and we really chose them because they either helped develop a vaccine for COVID and had a lot of recent lessons learned, or they were working in the nonprofit space trying to figure out how best to move their work forward. And so if we just focus on the playbook right now, it is publicly available already. And right now we've just been using it to capture a lot of the recommendations in terms of preparedness that are out there. And here's the dashboard that we've been using to really get a sense for where each country is right now in terms of their overall readiness. And so we've really mapped out 6 different categories here of really policies and guidelines that are available to see where they sit. And so we came up with what we think is needed most in a future outbreak. And so you can see something listed here, like emergency use authorization listed under accelerated access. When COVID started, almost nobody had any kind of emergency use authorization provision. And so now it's much better. More than half of the countries have it. But, you know, we still want to be aware of who has it, who doesn't. And we're working with countries who don't have emergency use authorization processes in place to go ahead and see what they might do to implement them to prepare for future public health emergencies. Under harmonization, you look at something like dossier. What we found from some of the leading developers is that what worked the best was if everybody just accepted the same dossier. Right now, every country has their own preferences for what needs to go into a dossier, but that all takes so much time. And so what they did during COVID is just say, this is what we have available. If you're willing to review it, then you'll get faster access to the vaccine. And so our recommendation for the future would be use the same dossier. Similarly, the package and label, use the same package and label, you know, and allow that and implement some kind of QR code that would allow people to go online and find, you know, maybe country-specific language or alternatives or changes in the label and everything. But definitely it's a lot easier to manufacture if you can just use the same package and label. Things like information sharing is another example. The cumulus is listed on there. You know, do countries allow sharing using this cloud-based system of a lot of the information out there? And so we're really just trying to test out, this is what we believe is needed, and figure out where countries are. And so the process is that we do some kind of pre-assessment for each country, and then, you know, we'll go ahead and meet with them. We send the pre-assessment to them, and then we have a discussion about where the country is in terms of that dashboard right now and where they might need work and help in changing some of their existing policies and guidelines to better prepare them. And so then, we'll go ahead and we're working with FR Path to publish all of this information so it's available publicly. And so anybody would have access to it. And so we have a couple of examples here. You can see on the left, this is a country that has already reached WHO maturity level 3 or 4. They're really ready. There are a few areas, marked here by yellow and red where their policies might not support what we need for a pandemic. And then there were a few areas that are still in gray. And that just means that we weren't able to find anything in their guidelines yet, but it's possible that they have them. It just wasn't easy to find. And so when we work with regulators to go through a dashboard like this, that's where the conversation starts. If it's green, then, they're ready in a particular area. All they need to do is not go backwards. But where there's yellow, red, gray, then that's where we spend a lot of our time discussing. But then when you look at the example on the right, it would be, a country that has not reached maturity level 3 yet. So it would be 1 or 2. And so you can see then they might not have nearly the amount of guidelines or flexibility in their policies to allow them to move quickly in a pandemic. And we don't want regulatory obstacles to be the reason that somebody doesn't get access to the vaccines that they need. And so then we'll have to do a whole lot more work with those regulators, but we want to make sure that they have what they need to go ahead and move forward and improve. And so what we've been doing this year is we've had these workshops. And so we've already met in Singapore and South Africa for each of the Asia Pacific and African regions to talk about what is needed from a regulatory perspective. And we're going to meet in Argentina in September. And, basically we give them a general overview, and it's a little more detailed than what I gave you. And we also invite them to have those one-on-one conversations with us, and so that we can give them what we know in terms of what's out there to go ahead and improve their readiness. And so we've been getting a lot out of the workshops, and people have been really open. And what we get a lot is invitations then to come and meet with their regulatory authorities. We spend half a day to a day with their whole team in each country to figure out what they have already and what they need, and then what kind of information we could give them or collaborations we could set up to put them in a better position to strengthen their overall preparedness. And so those have been going extremely well. We find that people are really motivated by just this dashboard. They want it to be green, and they want to, know what they need to do to get their policies up to where they need to be. And so that was all I wanted to share. When I guess Deb and I talked a little bit about the dashboard, and she had suggested that it might be a good tool when we look at the overall preparedness efforts and the legal frameworks that you've been discussing here, to maybe, add some kind of context around the work that you're doing. And then also, all the details are held in that playbook that I referenced earlier. And so the playbook just has a bunch of really short papers that summarize the overall approach and what countries should really be looking for in terms of their readiness. And it has links in there. If you have resources that you would like to point people to, we'd like to point people to those resources too. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. It's just a very high level, and I'm curious whether you think this would be helpful to the group, or if anybody has any questions.
Deb, did you have any additional before I kind of turn to others or ask a few questions?
Sure, just to say that, Kathy and I and Liz separately, I've talked separately to both of them about, putting a legal provision chapter, a specific chapter within the playbook, and I've been working on a draft, and certainly Liz and I have, the issue brief that could potentially start off that chapter. But I think it's flexible, right? And so I think the whole idea of the playbook was not for CEPI to reinvent the wheel, but to, you know, gather the resources that have already been, you know, established in some of those aspects and to put them all in one place. And the whole idea too is that this is just the regulatory chapter. There are other chapters within CEPI that are being worked on, but we were the best, and so we got ourselves first. No, I'm kidding. but definitely ours is available, like Kathy said. So over.
Thank you. And I think I can't figure out if I can display it, but I do think it would help to actually display a little bit of just what that playbook is because I think it does visually show people when you say that you've summarized some information and you've provided resources and links to additional information. I think that's really where I'm hoping that we might generate some discussion of what might be helpful and you know, to this group, which is a great resource for you. Thank you. Yeah, I kind of thumbed through it a little bit and appreciate, yeah, showing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, thank you. And so, you know, just to give you a sense for, you know, I just briefly described what's in the regulatory dashboard. And if anybody wanted to know more information, then this really explains how it was created and gives you the overall unfilled out dashboard and then walks you through what's in each category. So, I mean, some of them are self-explanatory. If it's you want to know whether, you know, an agency has reached WHO maturity level 3 or 4, then, you know, clearly that is spelled out here. But you know, ad hoc meetings with leading developers may not be as clear, but you know, we're just trying to say that it's really important to be able to open up to different developers and just work with them throughout the overall response process. And you know, this one would be really cryptic: support the 100 days mission. So, what really would that mean to somebody who's not that familiar with what CEPI's work is? And so, you know, we talk a little bit about the standard timelines and how you can go ahead and respond quickly. And it just provides some examples for each of these categories just to give people a better sense for what's in there. So it's a bit because, you know, there are so many different categories, just simple scrolling down and it really gives people much greater visibility. And these are the exact dashboards filled out that you saw just in terms of high and low readiness. But, you know, it just gives us a chance to really map it out for somebody who doesn't have the opportunity to sit with us on a call and understand what we're doing. And so there are, you know, several different categories in here. These are, you know, some of the most important that we had identified based on questions that we received. But access to vaccines is one that we get a lot. You know, what do you really need to do if there's an outbreak? And so people think you can just go ahead and distribute a vaccine as long as it's available in development status, but you can't do that. I mean, you know, we really need to just make sure that we clarify for people it has to be part of a clinical trial or a protocol or expanded access. And, you know, there are a few different provisions for how you could do it. And so we just map it out for people so that they understand and you know, we hope that it makes it easier for people to see that it's just not that simple. If you have something in development, you can't just go right to distribution. And so these are just some examples of what's in the playbook. And the other thing we're doing is creating some kind of AI search tool, but you know, really any of the AI search tools you have already will pick this information up. And so it will, you know, make it really easy for people to find the content that's in here if they're just using the general AI search tools that are already in existence. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, I think so. I'll turn it over to others. Emanuele? Hi.
Hi, Liz. And okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Holt, for your presentation. I had a question. First of all, let me say that we also use in our office this let's call it traffic light code.
Yeah.
We'd read it and then the green button in our list of medicines in short supply in Italy. So when the citizens applies and check whether a medicinal product is available or not, when they see the red color, it means that there are no available alternatives on the market. While if it is green, it is possible to find other products on the market. But that said, I would like to ask you brief clarification with respect to the information sharing, in which I saw that there were 4 red boxes in a row. So it seemed to be the hardest part, the hardest procedure, or in which there was absolutely no regulatory support for that kind of activity. Can you provide me just a little bit of explanation?
Yep, I'm just going to pull it up so everybody can take a look at it. So information sharing, we have
Information sharing.
A few different areas here, and one is related to prior knowledge. And so one of the concepts that we've been discussing with regulators a lot is what can we use from vaccines that have already been authorized to make it easier to accelerate future vaccines. And so we want to pull forward some of that information, and this would be primarily related to platforms, and go ahead and share it between products. And a lot of regulators don't allow that to happen right now. You need to go ahead and resubmit it. But what we'd like to do is see platforms be developed where you might have a dozen or more products manufactured using the same platform. And then, ideally you'd be able to go ahead and reference some of that data. It definitely gives you it gives me a lot more assurance if I feel like, oh yeah, this is something that has been used before. Existing agreements is another area that, so the time to come up with, I think, agreements among health authorities or countries is in peacetime. And so we're really looking for what agreements are already in place to allow for information sharing, because we know that, people are bound by their laws. And so, even when you're talking about outbreaks and the epidemiology and just so much information that's important for the world to know, unless there's some kind of existing framework in place, then they wouldn't be able to share the information. Some countries have restrictions on digital sharing of information. And so, we're trying to understand which countries those are. And really, like, if we need to emphasize, if we want, to be able to have a rapid response, you need to be able to take in digital information and then also share digital information so that we're in a better position to respond. And then a cumulus is something that Deb's going to talk about in a little bit. It is one way to share digital information that we have found that has been really effective. And it was not available during COVID, but has been developed since. And so we're just looking for ways to go ahead and improve upon that. So did you want to tell me, would any of those, I don't know, address the problems that you've seen, or are there other problems that you'd like to raise that we're not thinking about that should be included there?
Well, the first consideration is that we are not that digital as we expect to be, actually.
Right.
And this is something that we also face daily. We've been speaking about the data sharing at, I always refer obviously to the European landscape. When we consider the European data workplace, we have a number of different scenarios and tools which allow all the member states to share their knowledge with respect to the clinical trials, with respect to the pharmacovigilance. But in terms of sharing the real data regarding reactions, regarding adverse drug reactions, and so on, we find that so many places, especially in the public sector, we actually miss informatic tools. We do not have the digital platforms in place to share this information. So we keep on saying, we keep on pretending that we can share our knowledge, but substantially we have no yet, not yet, let's say, the possibility to share our information. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we
so much.
definitely saw that. I'm really glad you explained that. And so when Deb presents in just a little bit, then I think hopefully she'll give some alternative for what could be used to address that. Thank you. Anybody else have any other comments or questions?
I guess before we turn to Accumulus, I would ask, as you are continually working with the categories that you have, with the information in the categories, as you're doing the meetings that you described, is there an opportunity for our members to participate in that type of process?
Absolutely. So we are happy to meet with anybody one-on-one, and we are also thrilled to take your feedback. And so our intent in building this was not to put out what we wanted. It was really, we got feedback from developers, and also as we've been going out to regulators, they've been providing input on what they would like to see in it. They, based on their experiences. And so definitely, thank you. It does look like Martha has her hand up. Yeah. Martha, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm asking this question from a developing country, Uganda, and there's a slide which had two examples. One example had all green, and the other example had red. And I think that's an example that would actually fall in the region of Africa or sub-Saharan Africa. So after you've highlighted this red, what happens? Because I'm trying to understand what CEPI does. Do you support a country to actually turn to the green?
Yes.
Because when we were negotiating the pandemic agreement, these issues came up. Some stakeholders were saying that many countries, like for example, if you're going to work in Africa, different countries at different levels. And so much time is spent trying to just have a harmonized approach, like to the regulation. We have, like in Uganda, we have the National Drug Authority. In Kenya, they may have something else, different levels. So how does CEPI support these countries? Because there's highlighting these issues. And then also, like, if you look at the chart, you've just put the dashboard, the readiness dashboard. We have most of these issues, most of these elements you've raised in the law, but they're not applied. You see, pharmacovigilance, all these issues, they're in the law, but it's on paper. So you may look at a country's legal preparedness, look at the law only, but what happens afterwards? Is the law actually being applied? So there's also that gap. So I don't know whether it's enough to just look at the legal framework. Probably it would also be good to meet the authority, the regulator, but also to meet probably some third parties, like who have tried to apply the law within the country. So I'm not very sure about only looking at the law, because I know for Uganda we have very good laws, but application is a problem, or implementation. Yes, thank you very
It's
much.
a really good point. And so there are a couple of things that we're doing. And so I think if we meet with a country and we find out that there are areas of red, what we look for most is to try to create collaborations within the region. And so we might identify another country that already has a regulation in place that has addressed that. And, we recommend that they work together, or at the very least, the country that is not quite as prepared from a guideline perspective can just at least take a look at the resources in the region that are available to go ahead and improve it. There are some areas, like there might be something related to how clinical trials are conducted or something. And CEPI has a lot of efforts in different regions on strengthening some of those activities, readiness for the 100-day mission. I mean, so that there are a lot of other efforts that are ongoing, and then we would definitely let a country know about what those are. The other thing that we're doing is we're just starting to set these up, regional workshops, and these will occur once a quarter. And so we'll identify which areas it seems like most countries are having the hardest time with, and then we'll talk together with all of the countries. And so both the countries who have strengths in those areas and countries that have weaknesses in those areas, about how we might see progress toward something that looks better for them. And so I think there'll be a lot of work still to come. We really have just been rolling out the idea of the dashboard this year. And so what we've been doing mostly at this point is one-on-one, moving toward, identifying what else we might do. So
And if I
hopefully,
could, yeah,
yeah.
if I could just jump in too. So we're obviously geared to the regulators, right? So, and we have regional people in that cover regions. So we have someone that lives in Singapore to cover Southeast Asia. We have folks that cover EMEA, so the continent and global South, as well as Europe, and then we have a group that covers the Americas. So we have counterparts too. So again, we deal with the regulators, but then there are regional folks that cover the regions that sit in in a more policy CEPI regulatory or CEPI policy, or I guess policy folks. And I don't know. I see Hua is online too. I don't know if she wants to mention anything from her end, but so there's you know a network of folks that work internally with with us, policy, and the regional folks on different aspects as well. So I don't know if that helps anything to
Yeah.
so I
Yeah. The
yeah.
other thing I wanted to mention, Deb, is just, so the question about the actual response is a really great one. And so we do have other teams that talk about the overall response from a public health perspective, and then ultimately it's measured. And so we are looking at performance when there is an outbreak of a new rare disease. And we keep using this really great example from Rwanda last year where there was a Marburg outbreak, and within 9 days they had a developmental vaccine on hand and they were vaccinating the people who had been exposed to Marburg. Those are the kinds of responses that we're looking for. And so we're counting there every time there is a new outbreak. CEPI forms a team, an outbreak response team, and we're counting from that day. We want it to be certainly within 100 days, and whatever the shortest amount of time possible is, because we know that if we can get the vaccines out there in that really short period of time, then, the chances of it spreading, too broadly after that are much reduced. And so your point is a good one, and I think that's really what we're looking at right now. And then we have these after action reviews. Then after there is an outbreak, and then a country responds, and we look at how we can all work together to improve the response if it's needed for future outbreaks.
Yeah, maybe just to pick back what Deb and Kathy just said, we embedded in our funding agreements equitable access terms, which largely give us the tools in peacetime to respond to an outbreak, where we can trigger tech transfer, we can trigger if there is something happened in the project awardee itself, we have pre-planned project continuity plan and the public health license, all those mechanisms that can be maneuvered in times of outbreak response.
Thanks, Hua. I appreciate that. And the other thing to mention is that regulatory is holding tabletop exercises with regulators to walk through, certain aspects of responses. But CEPI as a whole is also doing stakeholder tabletop exercises. The first one that was done in Rwanda, I think it was last summer-ish, and that was multi-stakeholder, where one of the folks from our staff that is in the region, put together the movements for that specific tabletop exercise. So that's very very helpful thing for the multi-stakeholders that plug in ministries of health, different capabilities and capacities from that specific country going in. And I think there's one coming up maybe for pandemic influenza. I'm not really sure where that is. I don't know, Kathy, or what do you know? I think that's coming up, but I don't know where that's gonna be. So.
And coincidentally, then the Marburg example that I just gave you, that Rwanda responded in 9 days, it happened within a couple of weeks of this tabletop exercise we did with them to just figure out what they would do in an outbreak. And so, and it's not to take the credit. They said their response is part of a 10-pillar, overall response that is based on WHO recommendations, but they did it beautifully. It was a real great example to follow.
I'm giving anybody else an opportunity to ask a question at this point, or yes, Jared?
Hi, thanks for a very, very interesting presentation so far. So I work primarily with the procurement and liability subworking group, and we're working in a similar sort of product focused on liability and some other procurement issues. I think that the thing I was really curious about, given we are with that project, is your engagement with stakeholders in development of the playbook and also the dashboard. So I was wondering if you could just sort of talk more about sort of how you went about doing it. That would be helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, and so I really, to start it out with, we really had an in-person workshop and pulled together then representatives from many different developers, and so it was really developer focused in the beginning to see what they ran into, both what worked well and what didn't work well, and so that was the starting point. And so then we, created a dashboard based on that, but then took it on the road. We've been talking about it at conferences and getting more input from developers. But then also, we've met with maybe about 10 different regulators so far for in-depth conversations. And so we're getting feedback from them too. We've also been engaging some interest groups, PDA, biopharma, DCVMN, IFPMA, FPA, and just trying to get broader stakeholder feedback there too. And so it's been really helpful. And, we intend to just be as open as we can with all of the information. And we're just very eager to hear people's input and see what we can do to constantly make it better.
Deb, do you want to talk about Accumulus a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Let me just share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, again, not
Yeah, now we can.
yeah. I'm just so challenged with Zoom. Sorry.
It can,
Anyway.
that's it. Yep.
Okay, good. So I don't know how to change my slides though. There we go. So, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these intro slides, but the prioritization that we saw during COVID, I mean, the whole world was focused on one thing. And I think that was very helpful, obviously, to have a global pandemic to prioritize all the things that needed to get done in response to COVID. And so what we saw was really this sense of allegiance where both regulators and pharmaceutical industry was coming together for the main purpose of getting medical countermeasures out to those that needed it in response. Oh, golly, what happened? Do you still see my screen? Yeah. To see, to get these modalities out to the patients that needed them. And there was a lot of really good health authority collaborations. So what we saw during the COVID was a streamlined approval process. We saw integration of real world data and evidence, real-time sharing of data, and most definitely reliance with regulatory authorities. However, there was still inequity with access to medical countermeasures for the pandemic. So we are really geared. This is what we want, and Kathy mentioned about the dossier. We don't think that as much as, of course, in CEPI's mission, we talk a lot about equitable access, who mentioned about having those provisions within our agreements with our developers. However, we don't think that equitable access is possible without information equity. And that is really important to us, specifically in regulatory. And Kathy talked about the engagements that we've been doing in the last, well, ever since COVID, but really with our regional regulatory folks in line, really going out and talking to these different regulators and regions, and holding workshops and going to professional meetings and talking about this equitable access and the things that we're doing for the regulatory preparedness framework. So what we're seeing is, and what we'd like to drive with technologies, is that moving from what the current paradigm is in paper or PDF, which is really just electronic paper, and everything in red here, this column that's individual, it's, you know, things of developer only, post hoc. We want to do this paradigm shift where we want searchable files with structured data that if regulators, FDA, of course, is very, you know, has been doing this forever, you know, structured and analyzable data. We want collaborative and partially pre-populated, and we say that with, you know, prior knowledge. We want to get to a platform technology type of thing that will require licensable product or market authorizations for those vaccines. We want a global dossier. We want parallel submissions to many regulators at one time. Of course, we'd have to have a regulator of reference, but then once that's approved, we want all of the other regulatory authorities to rely on that one submission. And this is, again, this is for pandemic preparedness. This is not for everyday, you know, approvals of, you know, I don't know, just, I don't know, blood pressure medication or, you know, diabetes medication. This is for preparedness for public health emergencies, and then simultaneous and collaborative review. So what CEPI did was we entered into a project collaboration with Cumulus Synergy back in December 2024. And Cumulus is another nonprofit industry association that really was put together. Industry was challenged by Janet Woodcock from FDA at the time, the commissioner of FDA, saying that we regulators need your help, your industry help in with all the innovative technologies that you are bringing to bear for product development. We need your help in reviewing dossiers and things of that nature. So and we agree. And so we started this collaboration with them back in December, and really it's defining and establishing a new ecosystem for regulatory connectivity. And I'll talk a little bit about this innovation. We think that it enables preparedness, it builds trust, and it has the potential to do things faster, not cutting corners. We don't want to cut corners. And again, information sharing and information equity. And, oh, sorry, I hate this. So our framework is really to build this during the preparedness phase to then, have it ready for a public health emergency. And within the Accumulus platform, it's a cloud-based platform, and we see various parts of the cloud that will have different files or different data information in different places in this cloud. So this invited public workspace is something that we are that CEPI would really drive, what we're calling a pathogen disease development file. So right now, we'd like to we want to build it, and we have plans to build it for an all hazards medical countermeasure capability. So it's just not vaccines, or we have a monoclonal antibody. So we build it for, again, CEPI, we have a core portfolio. We have, say, for instance, we're developing countermeasures for Nipah virus. So in this pathogen disease development file, we will have a product and developer agnostic information about the pathogen, the disease, maybe an epi snapshot, things of that nature. Very something that these things aren't static, but we would update it as we would get new information on the pathogen or disease. The developer specific vaccine information is then something that would be that our developers would put together the information that could be contained in modules 3, 4, and 5, taking elements from those modules to really make the justification and rationale to a regulator of why that product can be used for Nipah, for a Nipah outbreak or an emergency. Again, we don't see, this is in the cloud, this is just developer. They put that together. CEPI doesn't see it. It would then be married together with a submission file that would go over to the regulators. The regulators have their space in the cloud that only the regulators see. They can interact with each other. They can work locally within their agency on this platform to review. And then once they have a review of that product for that disease or pathogen, then they could submit it. It would go back to the developer. And again, we want to do all of this in the preparedness phase, so then it could be sitting there waiting for the emergency phase. That's basically a bigger thing. So in our partnership with Accumulus, we have 6 work packages. And so we're developing these first we're doing a pilot with regulators and a couple entities. So we started out with 7 regulators, each from geographic places within the globe. But we started with 7. We ended up, I think we have 19 regulators now to be a part of this pilot. And it's a regulatory preparedness pilot, but the subject matter of the pilot are CMC best practices that CEPI was involved in this multi-year, multi-stakeholder group to put together best practices from COVID for process validation and comparability. So there are 8 total documents that are on the platform. The pilot started back in May. So right now we're in phase review cycle 1 So we're getting comments and questions from regulatory authorities that are participating. So we have USFDA is part of that, as well as Senegal, Zimbabwe, SAFRA from South Africa, India, CDSCO, Ghana FDA, El Salvador, Egypt, Malaysia, TGA, BPOM from Indonesia, and COFAPRIS from Mexico. We also have observers being Health Canada and Visa, HSA from Singapore, PMDA from Japan, MFDS from South Korea, as well as AVREF and the European Vaccine Hub. So it's all very exciting. And so, like you said, we're in the mix of this. We'll probably be having the end, completing that that pilot in late July, maybe early August, and having a readout when we go to Argentina in September. The other work packages, like I said, we're doing the PDDF and we're building the DSVI. We're doing security for the Global South. We do DevOps for developmental operations for the PDDF and the DSVI. We're also working with life sciences organizations that are part of the Cumulus Forum. We had a meeting with AstraZeneca, Merck, Sanofi, Amgen, and some others to really pick their brain about what they would see that would be functional in the DSVI, and we'd probably be doing an exercise or a pilot with them maybe in our next phase. And then, of course, the regulatory engagement strategy. We are going out to these different regional workshops, as well as the professional society conferences. This is just to talk a little bit about the pilot, which I already covered this. So that is it in a nutshell. I know that was a lot and it was pretty fast, but we're really excited, and we do think that the Accumulus platform is a very innovative technology that has the potential to change the regulatory paradigm. Accumulus is also running ongoing pilots with their developers, and the first one that they did last summer was with Roche. It was a post-approval change pilot that had the assessment done by EMA, and they put it on their the platform. And I can say that, and I don't have the slide, but the metrics were pretty astounding. That some regulatory authorities approved it outright through reliance. Of course, it gives them the opportunity to review the assessment report and put questions up, but it was quite significant turnaround time as far as getting that approved globally. So I'll stop there. Over.
Thank you. That was so much. And I really was looking forward to hearing both of these presentations. I hadn't heard them in full like this, and it was really, really informative. And I think anybody want to ask any questions? We're running out of time. We have 3 minutes. I want to give people a chance to probe this a little bit further, especially the information sharing components of it, which I think Emanuele and Martha highlighted some of the challenges in implementation, and that countries are grappling with, and trying to connect these tools to really help advance the ball here. I think it's really exciting, and I think maybe through the GHSA we can help identify what to amplify, what countries most want to focus on with, let's say, we're very focused on regulatory here in terms of let's say you know, emergency access mechanisms, what are the implementation challenges? What kind of issue briefs would be most useful? And leveraging this workforce, this group of GHSI to help bring that forward. And I'd love to hear Kathy speak a little bit more about what legal framework preparedness, what legal framework resources that Deb and I might, you know, continue to bring back and talk about. And then maybe that wasn't clear. Just looking at this group as the legal preparedness group. You heard Jared mention that we're looking at procurement mechanisms as well. Just making, you know, the broader legal frameworks that are the gaps that seem to be the ones that might be contributing to red spaces in you know, for countries, and focusing in on those legal framework gaps and helping us to bring them forward to this group.
So Kathy, maybe the thing is that building out more of a you know, legal pieces on the dashboard,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, again, we weren't when we, you know, when it was put together, really looking at a lot of the legal pieces of it, legal on specifics, making sure that, you know, regulatory pathways are identified and ready to go. Agreements with other countries are ready to go, but maybe not some of these other legal pieces. And, you know, you know, it would be interesting to see from this group, maybe one or two. I wouldn't want to overly inundate the because I think you could for the dashboard, but maybe some of the highlights or, you know, the big critical items to maybe
Yeah,
put
I
on the
thought you
dashboard.
would maybe draft something based on what you've started. You mentioned that you're starting a chapter for
Yeah,
legal
yeah.
preparedness. And so then we could, you know, see how that adds to the dashboard and how that might fit into the playbook. And then maybe we could bring it back to the group and
Yeah.
make a proposal.
Terrific. Well, it looks like we ran out of time. I really, really appreciate your presentations. And Kat, if you want to close out, thank you.
No, I'll just echo what Liz said. Thank you both for taking the time. This was really informative, and I think it's given us a lot to think about as an action package of how we can further collaborate. So I hope everybody has a good rest of the day and a good week, and we'll see everybody in September. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.